Guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We've got a great Figured Out Baseball podcast today that I'm very, very excited about. It's someone that we've had on the program before and someone that I'm really glad to have back on. He's in a new spot, and I think that he and his staff are going to do some really wonderful things. We're being joined today on the podcast by Nick Puccio, who is an assistant coach and the recruiting coordinator at Penn State University, who he and the rest of the staff are in their first year there. Of course, it's a Big Ten program out of State College, Pennsylvania, near to where I'm from, a program that I really want to see succeed, and I'm very excited for Nick and his staff to get in there and see what they can do. I'm going to give you a background on Nick before we jump into the podcast, and then we'll bring him in and start questions with him. He played at Dean College, which is a Division III school in Franklin, Massachusetts, and then Fitchburg State, a Division III in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. He started his coaching career in 2011 as an assistant coach at Southeastern Community College, a junior college in Burlington, Iowa. We actually have that in common as well. If you listen to the first podcast with Coach Puccio, you know that I also coach at Southeastern, so we sort of have that. It was a while before Nick, but we have that in common as well. The springs of 2012 and 2013, he was an assistant coach at Wheaton College, a Division III in Norton, Massachusetts. While he was there, the team went to the Division III tournament both seasons. In 2012, they went to the College World Series and lost in the championship game. After that, he moved on to be the head coach at Nichols College. He was there from 2014 through 2018. Nichols College is a Division III in Dudley, Massachusetts. In 2014, his first year there, the team won 6 games. 2 years later, in 2016, they won 24 games, which was a school record, and he kept it rolling from there. In 5 seasons at Nichols College, he coached 19 all-conference players and 2 guys that went on to play pro ball, which is not easy to do from a Division III school. From anywhere in the country, let alone the Northeast, that gets so heavily recruited by other levels. In 2019 through 2023, he was an assistant coach at Northeastern, of course, a Division I program in Boston, Massachusetts, in the Colonial Athletic Association. While he was there, he was the hitting coach and recruiting coordinator. The team won 30-plus games in 3 straight years to finish his time there. They appeared in an NCAA regional in 2021 and 2023. They won the conference championship both of those years. In the 2021 championship was the first Colonial Athletic Association championship won by Northeastern in the sport of baseball. In 2021, the team finished 36-12. It led the conference with a .295 batting average, as well as 118 stolen bases. The 118 stolen bases was good enough for 4th in the country. In 2022, they finished in the top 20 nationally with 107 stolen bases. Also went to the conference championship game that year, but lost. And then 2023, they really kind of turned some heads by going 44-16. They set a school record for wins. They set a school record by scoring 459 runs, of which Coach Puccio was the craftsman behind all that, running the offense there. The team also hit 106 home runs, which was 21st in the country. At one season, they set or tied 6 individual offensive records as well as 8 team records. Really, really incredible what happened there, especially in 2023. In 5 seasons at Northeastern, Coach Puccio coached 21 all-conference players, 1 conference player of the year, 3 All-Americans, and had 10 players drafted or signed by major league organizations. And then shortly after that, in July of 2023, is when Coach Puccio was hired at Penn State under the new head coach, Mike Gambino, who comes from Boston College. Nick, so glad to have you on the podcast today, man.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. Really excited to speak with you again. As you kind of rally through all those things, and it really just makes me think about the opportunity that I've had to work with some really great head coaches, and also coach some really talented players, and it makes me think of that and make sure those guys are the guys who, obviously coaches that gave me great opportunities to get to where I am today, but also having the ability to coach some really good players that helped us achieve some awesome goals. So just really special group of people.
Love the fact that you want to reflect on that and kind of give some props to the people who have given you a chance along the way. I'd like to give you a chance to do that, actually. Usually when I start the podcast, I start with something from the bio that kind of stands out, but in this case, I'd like to kind of start with that and like you to, or like to give you a platform to be able to, if you could, I know you probably have several people that have been essential to your rise in your career along the way. But if you could give a shout out to one coach who you feel like really took a chance on you or really sort of turned your career around. There aren't a lot of guys out there who play at the Division III level, then coach at the Division III level, and then, a handful of years later are at a Power 5 as a recruiting coordinator. So if you could maybe, point to one person that was really instrumental in your growth and your ascension in this business, is there anybody, Nick, or can you think of just one person, narrow it down to one person who you'd like to give some credit to?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to put my thumb on one guy. I've worked for so many great coaches. Obviously, Justin Schulte over at Southeastern Iowa Community College gave me my first opportunity, and then being able to learn so much from him there, and just what it takes to be great on a day in and day out basis. And then Eric Podolsky over at Wheaton College, who to me, talk about just consistency. And what he's been able to do with that program, for the last 25 years, it's just amazing. I learned a ton from those two, and then obviously, Mike Glavin at Northeastern, giving me a Division III head coach, who was a Division III head coach, the responsibilities he gave me early on, and all three of those guys are three guys who I would not be anywhere where I am today without those guys giving me opportunities, letting me make a bunch of mistakes, learn from them, and again, let me grow as a coach. And I'm very fortunate to have those guys as what I consider friends.
How many former coaches, head coaches, especially guys that sort of mentored you, do you still keep in touch with? Has that been something that you've been able to do along the way, is just kind of reach out to other guys that once mentored you and now, years after leaving there, whether it was 1 year or 10 years after leaving there, be able to reach out to some other people and say, hey, this is going on. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any advice on this, just to sort of help you, as you experience new things or have new opportunities that you want to call somebody and say, hey, what do you think about this opportunity? Do you still have some of the guys who have mentored you in the past that you still keep in touch with?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, all three of those guys I just mentioned, me and Justin talked a lot, this fall, and me and Eric Podolsky over at Wheaton, we still text back and forth, and have conversations. And obviously guys I talk to about this job, then obviously, Mike Glavin over at Northeastern, still consider him a really good friend, and we're in a bunch of different group chats, and we talk to each other, and if I need something, I lean on those guys, so I'm very fortunate to have a group of coaches that I really respect and that have had a lot of success in their careers. I'm really fortunate that those guys have no problem taking my call, so again, I lean on them a lot, maybe even a little bit more than I should with questions about, everything, and I think it starts with a relationship, obviously, that was built when we were working there, when working together, and it's grown into more than that. I think, again, I mentioned it earlier, I think it's grown into a friendship that I have with these guys.
So just to flip the script a little bit here, I know you haven't been at Penn State, you haven't experienced a spring there, you haven't gone through Big Ten play or anything like that, but you obviously have coached a very high level of Division I baseball. I think the stigma definitely exists in college baseball that if you, maybe less so now than it was 10 years ago or so, but if you coach at one level, that's kind of the level that you belong at. There are a lot of guys out there that coach Division II, Division III baseball, junior college baseball, and they sort of get labeled that they're a Division II guy, they're a Division III guy, they're a junior college guy, and it's not always easy to jump levels, but you've been able to do that. What would you say is the same about coaching Division III as opposed to coaching Division I? I'm sure there are a lot of differences, and that's probably something you've been asked before and something I've asked other coaches on this podcast, but what's the same for you, Nick, about coaching Division I athletes as opposed to Division III athletes?
The way success is bred is the same thing. You want your guys to develop an identity, and you want them to play a certain way and have attention to detail and do the little things well, and compete really, really well. You're going to practice the same way, right? I say that a lot. Like, your practices need to reflect your identity on the field on game day. And when you do those things and you practice hard and you compete and you have some toughness in practice on a day in and day out basis, when game day rolls around, your team's going to mirror that. And, you know, from my standpoint, I believe heavily in that from being successful. You know, what we want our team to be known as, what we want our identity to be. We want to be tough, and we want to be able to have some grit and compete and handle adversity, and, you know, be able to win games different ways. And no matter which level you're at, like, obviously, yes, the talent level changes somewhat. But if your team is fully invested in that, and your team goes about their business that way, then you're going to be successful at any level. Now, you got to get the guys to believe in that, and you got to get the guys to practice that way, and have them want that to be what their identity as a team is as well, you know. But that's the biggest piece, Jeff. Like, you can win at any level if that's how you go about your business day in and day out. Good players with a good identity. And you're going to win at the Division III, the Division II, the Division I level with any of that. And along with that identity is, hey, who your best players are. Your best players are the guys that are just animal workers, you know, and you know, day in and day out, they show up to practice. You see that drive in practice of wanting to compete and get better every day. And then they're the same guys that are putting in extra work on the front end, on the back end, right? And they're obsessed with that process of getting better. So in order to win and have success, right, you have to give them that environment and that culture piece for them to be successful, right? Guys who want to work hard and compete every single day at everything that they do. And then also it's making sure those guys are like, hey, they're putting their work in on their own to get better day in and day out. That's what it comes down to. Like, at the end of the day, we don't have enough time with these guys, you know, to develop them and get them to where they need to be. We've got to make sure they're doing and learning how to work so that when they're on their own, they're working on the right things and they're focused on the right things. So that's what it comes down to, in my opinion. And I don't think it matters which level you're coaching at.
Okay, we got a bunch of different directions that can go from that. I'm going to start with this. Who establishes the identity? Did your coaching staff bring that in and say, guys, this is the identity, you're either on board or you got to find somewhere else to play? Or do you sort of take the temperature of your team and you know, each team sort of establishes their own identity, whereas that could change a little bit from year to year? I'm sure there are some things that you want to be consistent. Who exactly establishes and sets the identity of a team? Is that something that you think it needs to be this way if we're going to win, and it's that one way, or, you know, you're going to have to find another place to play?
Well, I think it's something that happens a little bit more organically, Jeff. You know, I look at it. I think it's a process. You know, and it starts in the recruiting process with the messages that we're delivering to these guys as we're recruiting them. Right? If we want to talk about being tough, and we want to talk about having grit and competing and finding ways to win and being obsessed with being great, man, that better be our message from a recruiting standpoint. You know, that this isn't going to be easy, that we want guys who want to come in here and work hard and do things that have never been done at Penn State before. You know, like, that's a message that starts in the recruiting process, you know? And as that process continues and you get your guys here, like, your coaching staff's energy and their preparation for going into a practice and what that messaging's like on a day in and day out basis, that kind of cultivates your club. and that gets the guys on your teams, again, like they hear that message constantly, and as you get years and years and years together and you built this program, that message is being relayed from the veteran players on the club as well. And it's just, that's where you talk about an environment, a culture, that's special, right? It's the whole thing. I think everyone, whoever has started over at a program will say to you, hey, that year one's really hard to instill all those things. But I think once you get that thing going, right, and your message is being relayed from the day you step foot on campus to the guys that you're recruiting, it's that's how you get to where you want to be from an identity standpoint. And it's funny, like you said about how, it depends on who your team is, and, while you do have some principles that are similar every year, your team changes, and that's 100% right. But I think at the end of the day, when you say, hey, that teams are always known for this, and I'm not talking about what they do on the bases or what they do at the plate, but man, they're really tough to play against. And I think those things, when that's said about a team, man, they're really tough to play against, there's something that's being said on a day in and day out basis to get those guys to compete and work really hard day in and day out at everything that they do.
So Nick, when you're recruiting guys, you're just kind of at the early stages of that. You told me before we started recording that your incoming class, is probably pretty set right now. Your 2025 class, is really shaping up pretty well. So it's going to be a couple years before a class that you've had the full amount of time to recruit is really here. The 2024s, when you guys got there, I'm sure you signed all or most of your class there, but they weren't kids that you were able to establish a relationship with for very long. Just because of the nature of recruiting, you probably had to get in there and swoop in kind of quickly, and make some decisions pretty quickly. How do you go about recruiting guys who fit the identity? Is it questions that you're asking during the recruiting process? Is it the energy that you're giving out and you kind of want to see if the kid reciprocates that or kind of if the kid buys into what you're saying? Like, how exactly do you do that? Because I'm sure that there are a lot of talented players that you see and you're like, man, you see the guy play and you're like, man, this guy could really be an impact guy for us. But then I'm assuming that you have conversations that make you think, you know what? I'm just not sure this guy's a fit for us. So I'd like to ask you that question. How do you recruit players who fit the identity?
Well, I think first and foremost, you hit the nail right on the head. They got to be talented, right? Like, we're going to recruit talented players. That's the first thing. We want the best player that we can possibly get. And, that's always been my mindset. We're going to get the best possible player. And then obviously, again, I think that it's got a little bit more to do with the conversation that's had on our end, like our energy on the phone. I think our coaching staff has got a tremendous amount of energy. And again, I think that the way we talk about our program and we talk about our vision here at Penn State, that is going to excite you. And I think that it's going to excite you. And then when we get you on campus and you're around us, you're going to feel that either, hey, this is a place that I want to be. I know that I can come here, get better, achieve some awesome goals, and move my career on and potentially play professional baseball after this. I believe in those guys. And I just think it's us being us, and that's kind of how I've always recruited is, hey, it's us being us. This is what we have. This is how we're going to do it. This is the energy that we have. And I get it. Sometimes I might be a little much for somebody, and that's okay, but we want guys who are going to be attracted to that type of energy, and they're going to be attracted to that type of vision. And it's not necessarily to scaring a guy, but it's just us being us and having our energy, because who we are in the recruiting process is going to be who we are when you get here, so there's no surprises. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, This is how we do it. This is how we're going to do it. This is why we think this is a great fit for you. And we say it in that manner. And those guys either want that vision, they invest in that vision, they want to do that, or they don't, and that's just the best way for me to put it, I think. It's just us being us. And again, like, we believe what we're talking about. We're invested in what we're about to do with this place. Are you in with us? Is that what you want? We want you here. Do you want to be a part of that with us? And that's something that I think is really important in this whole thing, is just being ourselves in what we truly believe we're going to do here.
So I'm going to ask you a question from the perspective of like a young college coach who's trying to figure things out. And I'm going to go back to when I coached for Coach Schulte in 2008 and 2009, when I was really trying to figure out how to be a college coach, how to recruit kids. I can remember sitting at, late nights in the office there, and like every time I got on the phone with a kid, I was super positive, a lot of energy, but I felt like I was always trying to talk guys into it. And I'd be talking guys into it for, once a week for months at a time. And finally I was just kind of like, I feel like I'm wasting my time here. And I'm 23, 24, whatever. And like,
sure.
I've been talking you into this constantly. So I want to ask you from a young recruiter's perspective, how many conversations are you having with guys where you're sort of telling them about the program, telling them what things they can be excited about, letting them get to know you, and then at what point do you flip it and say, like, okay, I got to know, like, are you in or are you out, as opposed to talking to a kid for 6 months, because the feeling that I would get after talking with a guy for a while is like, all right, you're obviously not really buying this, or you think there's something better out there. I don't know if I want to keep courting you if this is not something you're excited about. So how many conversations, if this is a fair question to ask, and again, kind of the perspective of a young recruiter trying to learn from you, Nick, how many conversations are you having with a guy where you're sort of telling him about the program, trying to get him pumped up about it, to where you kind of flip it and start to say, okay, I want to know, are you in or are you out? This is who we are. This is what we're doing. Is that something that you want?
Man, that's a really good question. To pinpoint it might be a little difficult. I think that, again, like it starts with that first phone call, and that's, us getting excited about the player and that player getting excited about us. I think that relationships have a huge piece to do with this as well. I talk about that quite a bit in the recruiting process. I've developed some really good relationships and friendships with some summer travel coaches, high school coaches, and like developing that relationship and knowing that, hey, I can call this guy who this kid plays for, and he's going to shoot me straight on, like, hey, he's interested in you, or hey, he's not interested in you. I've been very fortunate at a lot of the places that I've been, especially at the Division I level, where our phone calls get taken, and maybe not so much at the Division III level, but I also believe, again, right, that like we have a pretty good feel for a guy, and again, it goes back to being transparent and us being us, sometimes, and again, like, hey, I'll flat out ask the kid, like, hey, man, are you not that interested in us right now, like, or hey, we've made you an offer and it's hanging out there for 3 months, like, where are we at, man? Like, like, be straight with me. I'm relatively blunt in the process, and I think that's it, because again, at the end of the day, I think that when we're talking to you and we're getting you excited about Penn State, and you come to this place and you see this place and you hear our vision and you hear about what we're about to do, and that either, and this has been wherever I've been, right? It was saying the same thing at Northeastern, or same thing when I was a head coach at the Division III level. You're either saying, I want this or I don't, and I think that guys, like, the longer they wait, obviously, the more that they're seeking something else, you know. But at the end of the day, our guys that we want are saying, hey, that's what I want to be a part of, you know. So you just kind of get that feeling off, you know, like off the start. Like once he's here, once he's on campus, once he gets an offer, all right, is this kid in on this or he's not? And I think that you get some feel for it.
You definitely get a feel talking with kids. And I know I'm about to ask you a series of difficult recruiting questions, but I don't want the Figured Out Baseball podcast to be the same podcast that everybody else has. So I want to try to dig into some stuff that people don't typically dig in on. And if you need to like fake that we have a bad connection, you hang up on me, I'll take that as a sign.
No doubt.
What's the average time a kid that actually commits to you? What is the average time from when he gets on campus and gets the offer to when he's saying yes, the average kid?
Oh, man. Again, I think that things have changed a little bit with the new recruiting rules. You know, with us not being able to offer guys until August 1st of their junior year, that has changed some things a little bit. You know, I think back in the old days, you'd have some offers hanging out there for multiple months. I think now that has been expedited a little bit. You know, I think that that's been sped up a little bit. You know, from when we can make that first phone call on August 1st and, again, get those guys excited about this place, and hopefully they've been to one of our camps, and, you know, that's the only way for us to really see a kid and build a relationship with them. Hopefully we've established that, and we're able to make that offer on August 1st, you know, and hopefully that they'd be ready to accept that, you know. But it's just obviously with the new rules, it has changed a little bit, you know. I always say a couple months, and generally after that, you know, I worry if the interest is still there, you know, because again, I think that guys hear our vision and they hear our message and they're really attracted to our energy, you know. And again, I think that that's kind of how it's been regardless of where I've been, you know, at every level, you know. I do think that that's a real thing.
I actually would have thought you would have said the opposite. I would have thought that the timeline of you can't speak to a kid until August 1st of junior year, I thought that would have maybe slowed it down because I thought maybe kids would be saying, hey, I appreciate you calling me. I'm trying to set up all these visits, but it's going to take me a while. I got quite a few schools calling me. I need some time to be able to see all these places to evaluate. I would have thought that as opposed to, you know, because if you can recruit a kid as early as you want to, I just would have thought that would have given kids, I guess, maybe a timeline that wouldn't be so, well, I guess, you know, not so crunched together, but also like when I've already been to some places and, so I'm not really in a hurry, but man, I showed up to Penn State. That place just screams the place I want to be. Anyway, that's interesting that it's kind of sped up. I would have thought
and to add too, so like they can't visit until September 1st. We can be on the phone with them August 1st. They can't visit till September 1st, right? So kind of when I say that, it's, hey, we get them on campus there that first weekend in September. We get them really excited about this place, and hopefully we have an answer from them, you know. But that's not how it always works out either, you know. And I think that that's maybe the biggest piece, right, in recruiting is that, you know, me and you talked about it earlier, where guys have rushed into decisions for years because they felt pressured, right? So everyone's timetable's a little bit different. And, you know, I get it, you know, I get it. I think we all get it. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure that a family and, you know, that family in general are making the right decision, you know, and they feel comfortable with their decision and they're not being bullied in their decision, right? So, like, again, I think that from our end, like, yeah, we're hoping that we're taking the right steps so we can get a commitment from a kid, and he's ready to make that commitment, you know, once he steps foot on campus September 1st, September 2nd, right? But also we want to make sure that families see this place and say, that's where we want to be. you know, sit down, meet with us, and it's a two-way street too, right? Like, we get an opportunity to be able to sit down with them, you know, one of those first 2 weekends in September and say, hey, this kid's a fit for us, or this kid might not be a fit for us. Like, I talk a lot about that first initial conversation, like, hey, that's as much of that visit is as much of a chance for us to get to know you as you getting to know us. You know, so again, like when I talk about like that process, and I talk about getting on the phone on August 1 and getting kids excited about it because maybe they've already been to campus from a camp or whatever it might be, and then maybe get them back out September 1, September 2, they're ready to be really excited and call this place home, you know, and it's our job as a coaching staff to make sure that family feels like this is where, you know, their kid can grow and prosper and become, you know, a great person.
Thanks to see your answer about that one, because my experience had, you know, I know that I was out of college ball for a long time, and people on the podcast probably don't know that I jumped back into coaching for a year last year, and then back out, which is another podcast altogether. But I guess I've just found that a lot of times, you know, kids will be uncommitted and just they'll be kind of out there looking for the right fit. And when they talk to your staff, they come visit, they get a chance to sit down with you, shake your hand, look you in the eye, see your campus. A lot of times the guys that say yes, it happens pretty quickly because of what you just said. The family and the kid feel at home when they're with you. And if they don't, it usually ends up being a no, or even if half the time if it's a yes, it doesn't work out, you know, long term, just because the hesitations they had at the beginning, I think, get a little bit more pronounced as time goes on. But I was just kind of curious if you had the same experience where a lot of the yeses come pretty quickly, just because it's like once a kid leaves there, he feels pretty confident that, you know what, I feel really good about this fit for me. Anyway.
Well, I think, again, I think that that's a huge part in it, right? Like, it goes back to our first thing that we started talking about here, is that their families and players are going to, that we want here, are going to be attracted to our energy. Our energy and the way we go about the recruiting process is the same way that we're going to go about our style of play on the field and how we go about our day-to-day. And I think that those two things are just so important. And the right guys see that and say, man, that is for me. That's what I want. That's where I'm going to grow. That's where I'm going to develop. That's where I'm going to get a great degree. That's where I'm going to become a pro. Like, guys see that, and they come from families that see that. And I think that that's the biggest piece. I think that's why, you know, again, when you know, you know. I usually say that a lot, you know. When you know, like, man, that's the place for me. And it's not always the case, but I think more times than not, that's how it usually plays out.
Give me a scenario, without naming names, where you've had a kid on campus and you've said no because of either what your visit was like, or even like things you've heard from a coach during the recruiting process. So you talk to a kid, conversation goes well, you kind of check some references, people that know him, and you hear some things, and then you kind of circle back and say, hey, I just don't think this is the right fit. And I'm asking this, Nick, not because I'm trying to expose any kids. I certainly don't want you to name any names, but because I want to educate people on the recruiting process, and I'd like for some high school players or coaches or parents of high school players who are listening to this podcast to be able to identify some of the things that someone like yourself, you would recognize these qualities and say, you know what, just not for us. So if you can, I would love it if you could, like, remember some specific kids, obviously probably at Northeastern because you haven't been at Penn State that long, maybe even with your first fall recruiting at Penn State, some kids that you have said no to, and if you could tell me a specific reason why. And I hope I know this is another probably a tough one, Nick, but I think it'd be tremendously valuable if you were able to, you know, to recall a couple of kids who talent-wise, that's another part of this. I'd like, if you could, guys that talent-wise fit, guys that talent-wise would have made you better, but you decided to back off and say no because of something specific, for a specific reason?
So I think that first of all, we're dealing with, 15-year-olds sometimes. If we're recruiting a junior college kid, we're dealing with 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, I always say this. Guys have an opportunity to grow up. And I think that we're recruiting kids at a young age, obviously, and the kid they are, right, like right now, sometimes it's just a maturity issue. And there's a difference, right, between a kid that needs to grow up, man, I could take a chance on that. Like that's a kid that's got a chance to be really special. He loves baseball, but he's got to grow up a little bit. He makes some poor choices here and there. You can live with that, right? If they love what they're about to get themselves into, which is college baseball, right? That's why we're all in it. We love it. Honestly, anybody that would say something to me of like, I don't know how much he loves baseball. When somebody says that they don't have the passion for the game, that we share as a coaching staff, and everywhere that we have had success, we've shared that same passion and love and energy. If they don't love it, if they don't love working, getting in the cage, they don't love getting in the weight room, if they don't love those things, they don't love baseball, that's where a guy will lose me. And I think that again, like the growing up piece, I'll take a chance on that any day of the week. But someone who's, one of their top 3 priorities in their life isn't baseball, and the other 2 being their family and being academics, it's probably not a great fit. And those are the guys who they want to make decisions for other reasons in the process. But we want guys who at the end of the day are making decisions on Penn State as a great academic institution and to play baseball at a really high level. And that's what we want. And if there are other reasons going into their decision, it might not be the right fit for them. And that's fine, but that's what we're talking about, and that's what we're getting families excited about. And if I get that report that, hey, this guy, I don't know how much he loves it. He's really talented, but I don't know if he's obsessed with being great. That's kind of the piece that would put me in a little bit of a different direction, or put our staff in a different direction.
What questions are you asking, and to whom in the recruiting process, Nick, to really figure that out?
That's a good question. I mean, I think high school and travel coaches, and again, I mean, this goes back to building relationships. I think that with the relationships that I've built over, my whatever it is now, I think it's 12, 13-year coaching career, I can ask guys those questions, and again, like I think you develop a network, as a coach, where you have high school coaches, travel coaches, you have some scouts, guys who just are around the game in a respective state. It's you're a network of people that, hey, I'm recruiting this kid from Southeast Pennsylvania. I know this guy down there. He knows all the players. Let me ask him about it before I ask that summer coach. And, making sure that I have a relationship with that summer coach so I know he's going to give me the right answer. And those are the things that I work really hard at, because that's a big piece. We talk a lot as a staff, and Coach Gambino talks a lot about the makeup piece. We got to get the makeup right. And I believe in that. You got to get the makeup right. You got to know what you're signing up for with that, with that player. And again, I think that having that relationship with other people who might be out of that player's circle is really where I value. And you got to develop them. You got to build them. You got to be willing to be on the phone and talk to people and communicate. And like, that's a huge part of getting the right guys in your program. Again, like, hey, we'll take a chance on guys. Guys got to grow up sometime. Like, these guys have a lot of pressure on them, especially at a young age or whatever. If you make a mistake when young in life, a 15, 16-year-old man, that happens. Or your priorities might not quite be in order, but at the end of the day, the love for the game, the passion for the game, those are the things that we want to see. Because those are the things where every single day you're going to show up to the ballpark and be excited to be there every day. Are you going to be an animal in the weight room, right? Are you going to put the work in on your own to be better than the guy next to you? Are you going to take that guy with you who's next to you and work with him, like, and get extra work with that guy? Like, that's what it's all about. That's what great teams do. They're obsessed with that. That's the main point. And I got to go to I think as a staff, we value our contacts and going to them and saying, hey, what's the deal with this guy? Does he love baseball? And you know what? Like, hey, sometimes you can see it. Sometimes you can't see it, in the recruiting process. But building a really good network and talking to people is just so valuable. It's so important. And hey, sometimes you still get it wrong. It's just the name of the game, But it's something that I believe in firmly is our relationships with people all over the baseball community, so we can find out what the makeup is on all these guys.
If for high school coaches listening to this, sometimes I believe that it's difficult for high school coaches sometimes to talk about their players and say anything negative about them. So how are you just straight up asking these questions, like how much does he love the game? Or what specific questions, if I can just dig in here just a little bit more, specific questions you're asking travel coaches, high school coaches, because you probably talk to high school coaches who have never had a player play at your level. So for a high school coach, he might say, oh, he's a hard worker. He's a really hard. Then you get him and he's like, well, he's like a below average worker for us. So, sometimes what a high school coach considers a hard worker is not a hard worker at your level. Like, what can I ask just, Nick, what are some specific questions that you ask high school travel coaches? Like, do you ask them to put it on like a 1 to 10 scale? Do you ask them to like compare to somebody they've had in the past? What specific questions are you asking to really, really dig and find out if this kid has the makeup that you're looking for? Because again, coaches are not, I don't think, apt to say bad things about their players, and especially sometimes high school guys, travel guys would love to get their players to your level. So it's not easy for a travel coach to tell you something negative about a guy because they want to put on their roster that, hey, we've sent a couple kids to Penn State almost every year. That's great for them on the travel side of things because it helps them recruit other players. So I know that you have to dig to get these answers. Sure. You know that guys aren't just offering up just negative information about these kids. So can we get specific, if possible, about what specific questions you're asking and how exactly you dig enough to get what you're looking for?
Yeah, well, I think that it starts with this, right? And again, I talked about being able to build a great relationship, and you're not always going to have a great relationship, right? So like, there'll be a guy that we're recruiting from, for the first time. We don't know the high school coach, we don't know the travel coach, but from our standpoint, I go back to this, right? Does he show up early? Is he the last one to leave? what's it like? What's the you know, what's he doing off the field, right? To get the program better. You know, as far as bringing other guys with him, as far as what he's doing in the weight room. You know, I think those are the things, you know, that are really important. You know, subtly ask, you know, a travel coach is, hey, was so-and-so, was he in there today? Oh, yeah, man, that guy's in here 5 days a week. Like, just the subtle conversation, I think, is really valuable, you know, because I think it tells you a lot.
Great stuff. I want to go back to some things that you talked about earlier and just kind of revisit some things that you said. I want to dig more into Penn State a little bit, and I'd love to talk about you know, kind of the vision that Coach Gambino has for you all. But I want to start with a couple other places, and hopefully we have time to hit all this today, Nick. I'm just going to ask you maybe sort of a weird question that maybe I don't know, doesn't get asked a whole lot. But you said earlier just about like when you're competing, you want guys, and as a team identity, you want to find a way to win. I just would like to ask you exactly what that means to you. You know, how you would define characteristics that help you find a way to win. Because I think that there are certain terms in our game that that get thrown around a lot and maybe sort of lose some meaning because they get overused. And I think like finding a way to win is something that a lot of coaches say, but there aren't a lot of guys that I feel like really, really get what that means. But I'm going to say from your track record of winning that you do get what it means. What are some things that players do, things that you guys do at practice to teach your kids how to find a way to win? Like, what exactly does that mean to you?
Man, I love that question. That's, again, I think that defines you. That defines you as a program. That defines you as a group, you know. Finding a way to win can be put in a lot of different ways. The way I like it the most, or I prefer, I should say, is what happens when things don't go according to plan? What happens when the guy on the mound is making it really difficult on us? We've punched out 7 times in 4 innings, and the wind's howling in, and we're down 3-0. You know, our guy didn't give us a chance on the mound. How are we finding a way to win? You know, it kind of goes into, you know, and again, like the model that you're seeing a little bit, you know, as far as in that moment. I talk a lot about playoff baseball in Major League Baseball and how that's so much similar to the college game. You know, that's a lot more comparable to the college game than when you're watching 1 of 162, you know, on a June afternoon. Like that's what it's really about. And when you're finding ways to win with that wind howling in, you know, maybe to start a big inning, are you able to get a bunt base hit down there to start something off, get that pitcher in the stretch? Are you able to have a really tough, competitive at bat? You know, I started talking a lot about win this pitch. You know, in 2022 at Northeastern, you know, we struggled a little bit offensively right in the middle of our year, and we just made a conscious effort as a coaching staff to get back to valuing winning each and every pitch, right? That's it. And getting guys to understand that, right? Like, hey, you just took a really good fastball on the black, on the outer half, okay? Yeah, it's a strike. That's a win, man. Let's make that a positive thought. Yeah, hey, you're down 0-1, but that was a win. Maybe it was a great pitch at 0-1. Now it's 0-2. That was still a win. All right? Now we're going to embrace hitting with 2 strikes. And we're going to compete, and we're going to win the next one. Right? So that's something that, again, it's when things aren't going your way, are you able to find the positive in that. All right, well, I got to do it this way. All right, this guy's freaking pounding me in with turbo sinkers. Am I going to find a way to, I don't know, move off the plate, right? Make that pitch a little bit more middle in as opposed to in, where I can't get to it? That's competing. That's finding a way, right? Hey, man, we've hit over 100 home runs this year. Okay, having a great year, but you know what? Today it's just not happening. Are we willing to take what we get and take our single, and start the line moving? That's what finding a way is, having a great one-pitch mentality, right? I talk a lot offensively about being multiple, being able to win games different ways, running the bases. Is that a part of your game? All right, I don't really run that well. I can't steal bases. Well, all right, the dirt ball read, is that in? Can we do something with you to add to your game on the bases to help you steal bases? Maybe the delays in your game, right? Maybe we're doing some type of vault. Like, that's finding a way. It's never I don't do that well. That's not it. We can maximize what you do to make that better. And that's finding a way. I love it. I think that's something that, as you get going and games become, more meaningful as the year goes on, finding a way is really what you've got to do to win those games. Can you find a way when everybody is basically at the same playing field? When you get to a regional or whatever it might be, do you have ways to win? And that's it. And I think that's one of the biggest things, from an offensive standpoint, especially, it's when you don't have that day what you do best. Can you find a way to win a game a different way? Can you bunt? Can you hit and run? Can you run and hit? Can you get a dirt ball? It's just always like, oh, well, that shut down today. Well, all right, but what can we do to make it our advantage? Like, that's a huge piece for me, and it's a huge part in being successful as a program.
When you're talking about an offense being multidimensional, the way that I sort of had this conversation with the team that I coached last year was that if the only way you can score runs is by hitting extra base hits, and the extra base hit's not there today because you have a pitcher who's shoving, you're facing, the conference pitcher of the year, and it's just, like you said, it's just not happening that day. You still have got to find a way to scratch 3 or 4 runs and give yourself a chance to win that day, and you've got to be able to do more than just hit, the extra base hit. So I'm going to ask you, with your own guys at Penn State, good time to ask because you just recently finished your first fall, and I don't, maybe this is maybe this was taught before you got there and it wasn't new to the guys, but how much time are you spending in practice, as an offense? And when I say you, I mean Penn State, and even you in the past at Northeastern, where you were the hitting coach. How much time are you spending at practice working on these other things? So, like, does everybody on your offense bunt to a certain number of times a week, couple days a week? Do you practice hitting and running daily, once a week? Are you practicing hitting behind runners when you get a guy on second, nobody out, in a 1-0 game or a 1-1 game or whatever, and you hit a leadoff double or a leadoff single with a dirt ball, you get a guy to second base? Are you practicing hitting behind the runners? Is that stuff that you just sort of talk about and give guys put it in their minds that sometimes you have to do this, or is that stuff that you're practicing a lot? Do you have specific things at practice you do, outside of just regular BP where you're working on that kind of stuff? Just kind of curious how you work this in to be a part of your offensive identity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, we've kind of coined winning baseball and what winning baseball means, and that's a huge part in it. There are going to be times where you're just going to put together a productive at bat, and there'll probably be a lot of guys that disagree with me on this, but I go back to the whole, it doesn't matter what your identity is in the batter's box and what you're bringing to the table. When you get to 2 strikes, man, that's a competitive mindset, and that's the difference between winning and losing. It's a huge piece. And again, it goes in your messaging daily, with what you want to be offensively. Okay. Yeah, we want guys to do some really special things. We want guys who, again, are going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. We want guys who are going to be able to, slug and have a bunch of extra base hits. But at the end of the day, right, like, we want guys who have really good, efficient swings. And we're going to build that. And some guys are built to hit the ball out of the park and in the gaps. And some guys aren't. Some guys, the swings aren't built for that. And some guys, again, like, it's just, sometimes power happens. And we let it happen, but we want to be really efficient with everything that we do with our swing. So, again, like, we talk about winning baseball and scoring runs and the process of scoring runs. Like, I think that's the biggest piece. Like, yeah, we can talk about runs scored, great, but what's the process of scoring runs? Getting on base, keeping the line moving, getting a guy to third base, runner on third base less than 2 outs, scoring that guy when our probability is the highest, not doing it with 2 outs, right? Like, understanding that we can't punch out with that runner on third base with less than 2. Moving the baseball with a runner on second base, no outs. Hell, I'll even say moving the baseball, the runner on second base in 1 out, because 90 feet in college baseball is a lot more valuable than 90 feet in professional baseball. In college baseball, you're a spiked heater away from a dirt ball region scoring a run. I talk a lot about 90 feet. 90 feet's really important in the college game. And it's really important in you scoring runs. So that's again, like, I do believe in a 2-strike approach. I do believe in moving runners with 2 outs, right? And I also think that that mindset and that concept, hitting runs, those types of things, it also kind of helps you learn your swing and getting a barrel to a baseball. I think those things make you better hitters. Slashing, bunting, like, all of our guys do it. I've always believed in those things, right? They do all of those things because it might help you unlock something in your regular swing, right? Guys bunting, seeing the ball off their barrel. Guys slashing, like, shortening things up. So it's principles in what we want to do offensively, but it can also help guys feel some different things. Man, 2-strike approach, guys getting on top of the plate, shortening it up, getting up off the knob a little bit. Like, sometimes that makes them feel, man, I feel better here than I feel in my normal setup, right? And it's all winning. You're teaching them winning baseball and also teaching them what some things are supposed to feel like. So again, I think that stuff's very important. And right, hey, I said it earlier, you're trying, in college baseball, it's a lot more like playoff baseball. When you're trying to get to a regional, you're trying to win a conference championship, you're trying to, basically, again, get in that large bid, whatever it is. That sample size is a lot smaller than it is in the big leagues, right? So winning baseball comes up a lot more than not.
Go back to something else that we talked about, or that you discussed earlier in the podcast that you brought up, about your practice needs to reflect your identity on game day. So you talk about winning and just about, the importance, the different things that go into winning and becoming a winner. How difficult is it for a new coaching staff to establish the practice speed that you're looking for? And as a coach, what sort of identity do you need to take to get players to buy into that? Like, do you find yourself when you first got to Northeastern, you first get to Penn State, where you have to be a little bit harder on the guys in their first fall, especially to basically establish what you want them to be, and then once it's established, you can ease up a little bit? And I'm asking this just at Lander, where I was last year, I had to be, and I wasn't necessarily expecting this, but I felt like I had to do it. I had to take on an identity, being a little bit harder on guys, being a little bit, being pretty demanding in the fall, because there were a lot of aspects of the game that I didn't feel like there were boxes we weren't checking that I felt like we really needed to check to be able to win. So I didn't know what to anticipate when I got there, because you don't know what a program's going to be like, but I felt like I had to be a lot more demanding on guys, a lot harder on guys in the fall than I wanted to be. And we got to our first spring game, and I'm kind of in the dugout in pretty good spirits and enjoying myself. And one of our backup catchers, who's an older guy, was like, "It's the same guy that we've had all fall." And I'm like, "Yeah, Blake, it's kind of who I am, man. I felt like I kind of had to be that guy in the fall to really establish what we wanted. But like, I have fun on a baseball field. Like, this is the real me, But I felt like I had to be that guy in the fall to demand out of these guys what we needed from them to become winners. What did you find or how have you had to adapt? Maybe things you've had to do in the past, basically to establish the identity that you've been looking for at the programs that you've joined. Particularly when you got to Northeastern and you got to Penn State. Have you had to I guess to have the same thing I experienced, where you're demanding a lot. You're a little bit more demanding, a little bit more of a drill sergeant-y than you'd like to be, to get the guys to buy in and to really demand the caliber of practice, the speed of practice that you want. Have you found that you've had to do that at new programs, just to sort of establish what it should look like, and then after a couple of years it runs itself a little bit more than at the beginning?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing, we're very fortunate. I think we have a great staff here. And again, it goes back to I've worked on some really great staffs, and I think we share the same vision for how we want our program to be identified as, and as far is how we are in our practice, I think we're ourselves, and bringing energy every single day and having a very well planned out practice that's discussed. And, hey, listen, we're a brand new coaching staff. And I think one of the great benefits about our staff is we've all known each other for 12 or 13 years. It's crazy. We just picked up our lives and moved on. We never worked together, any of us, but we all known each other. With Coach Gambino, Coach Loizo, and Coach Joust, and we've all had a relationship, and I think that that's very valuable in all this. Now, again, we've never worked together, so I think it's not so much us, right? And the guys I think we're really lucky this year. Like, our guys showed up, they're eager to get better, and that's something that we couldn't have asked. We couldn't have asked any more with what them showing up on a day in and day out basis, being eager to get better. Okay, I think how it gets better and gets easier is that when those guys, and this just goes from program development in general, when you're back for year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, it's when those guys are hearing what we're talking about, and they're helping us with the messaging, if you know what I mean. And it's when we're introducing what we're doing on the bases, in our terminology, our verbiage. Sometimes you have those freshmen, they're deer in headlights, right? It's like we're talking a different language almost. And they don't want us to ask us the question, but they have no problem asking that junior the question. And I think that that's really valuable. I think that's really important when you're talking about team defense or team offense, other than, the basics of the game of baseball. And I think that that's where you make that jump as a program, and man, I talk about it from just overall, like, who we are and like the way college baseball is going. I think that you still have got to do a really good job recruiting high school kids and retaining high school kids, because you need guys who are, 3 and 4 year guys in your program, because they're your best coaches, right? They're the ones who can translate the message You know, I find that so valuable. You know, so listen, year one's always your hardest. And once you go from there, and when you're consistent on a day in, day out basis, that's where your guys start to learn the terminology. They learn the verbiage, and then they become your best coaches. Because they're talking about it. When you have the right guys, they're not just talking about it on the field. They're talking about it in the clubhouse. They're talking about it in the dorm room, in the apartment. Those guys become your best coaches. So I really value that piece.
I think I'm going to ask one more question before we wrap up here. At Northeastern, you were there for 5 years, and in the 5th year was the year that you set the school record for wins. You really, had an amazing year offensively. And the transfer portal has made recruiting kind of really, really crazy, really different than it used to be. And I'm not saying this as a way for, like a PR piece for Penn State, but I legitimately want to ask you, how long does it take in a Power 5 conference? How long does it take a program like Penn State, who, had a coaching change for a reason, not a program that has exceeded expectations, right, in the past. How long legitimately does it take for everything to come into place for Penn State to be what you would consider a successful baseball program? How long does that take at a Power 5 school?
Yeah, well, listen, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. But I will say this, okay? This is somewhat of a dream job for me, and it's a dream job for our coaching staff. I'm very lucky to be here. I never would take this for granted. I've always wanted to be in the position that I'm in today, and I can't explain the gratitude and the thankfulness that I have to be in this position. We, as a coaching staff, we basically all uprooted from the Northeast, and we came down here from New England and came down here with our families. We all have kids. We all had lives, and we all had really good situations. And we uprooted our lives for a job here in central Pennsylvania that we wouldn't have done it if we didn't think that this is a place that we could do some really special things at. We're very fortunate. We got into this place at a great time. We've made a huge investment, in our program. Our ballpark is basically getting completely reconstructed. From the insides of the ballpark to the surface, the lights, the video board, the padding, to the guts of the clubhouse, batting cages, training room, everything. An awesome project that's being done. There's a huge investment going into this program, which is really exciting. Okay? You take that with, what Penn State is. It is a flagship institution in the country. It's amazing. Me and my family have absolutely loved it here in Happy Valley. I really don't think I'd want my family being raised anywhere else. Like, it's awesome. We're very excited to be here. All that great stuff, right? This place has me very excited. And I think us as a staff, we're very excited to know that what we can do at this place. At the end of the day, we have huge visions and goals for this place, right? Pennsylvania itself is an awesome state from a baseball standpoint. It's loaded with talent, okay? Penn State's got a great identity as an institution that resonates throughout the country, in the Northeast, into the Midwest a little bit. The Big Ten's growing. It's a great league. Obviously, it is expanded out west, with some great programs. I think it's very attractive for a Pennsylvania kid to stay in state here and play college baseball at the highest level. And I'll even go outside of that into the Northeast, into the Midwest a little bit. There's great things here to be excited about. I think that this is a place that we can achieve all of those goals, right? Now it's about getting the right guys and showing up every single day and getting better. We believe that as a staff, right? And the guys that we're recruiting are believing in our vision. So it's kind of where I'll end it.
Place to end. I'm excited to come see Penn State and see how the team progresses over the next couple years. I hope this is not the last time that we have you on the podcast. Nick, this has been great. This is Nick Puccio, everybody, who's the assistant coach, recruiting coordinator at Penn State, about to embark on his first spring day with a new staff. Nick, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to be on this podcast. I know at this time of year we're recording around Christmas. I know this is a precious time of the year with family, so I really appreciate you taking the time out of your family life to come join us on the podcast. Very much appreciated.
No, Jeff, I always love talking to you. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, we're rooted with some things, and we've developed somewhat of a relationship, so I enjoy getting on here and talking to you a little bit. And again, it kind of goes back to, a passion for baseball and loving baseball. I love talking baseball, the whole deal. So whenever I get that opportunity, I always say yes.